Each year in the United States, thousands of major crimes go unsolved. When the case has gone cold and police have nowhere to turn, they seek assistance from the public. This is a program dedicated to solving these cases. This is Crime Stoppers Case Files.
Welcome and thank you for joining us for the Northeast Ohio edition of Crime Stoppers Case Files. There are over 1,400 Crime Stoppers organizations operating around the world. These organizations empower citizens like you to become directly and anonymously involved in fighting crime in our communities. Crime Stoppers is an important law enforcement tool, a proactive approach to removing dangerous criminals from the streets and making them safer for everyone. Each week on this television program, we'll share facts with you from unsolved cases, and you'll have the opportunity to submit information that may help investigators and earn a cash reward for doing so without ever giving your name. The first three crimes we'll feature on today's episode were committed by the same two thieves who went on a one-night crime spree, robbing 3 different stores on Cleveland's west side. Here's Crime Stoppers coordinator Sergeant David Rudd with more.
In the early morning hours of April 19, 2010, we have video showing the suspects enter the wireless phone store located at 152nd and Triscuit Avenue. They break the front window, they run inside and begin removing items. There they stole flat screen TVs and over $4,500 in cell phones, at which time they passed the items out to the door to waiting accomplices, and we feel probably loaded into a vehicle right in the same area. At which time they left the wireless store and went directly across the street to the Sunoco gas station, again smashing the front door, entering the store. We're not sure what they were looking for there. It's possible they were alerted to some passing traffic because they weren't in very long and quickly exited the store, taking only a Red Bull soft drink with them as they left. From that location, we find about 30 minutes later another break and entering at the Aaron's rental store at 116th and Lorraine. There the same MO was conducted. They smashed the front door, entered, and stole a series of flat screen TVs from that store. The only thing we have on them is obviously the video is a decent video, although all the suspects used gloves and had their faces pretty well covered. But we feel if somebody should see the clothing they wear or possibly know that they're in the possession of these cell phones or TVs, that possibly they'd give us a call. As far as the suspects go, we see the same 2 suspects appear in all 3 videos. Although you can tell that there are accomplices, we don't get a lot of good video on them. So basically what we're trying to identify is the same 2. In that case, it's the gentleman that's wearing the Russian-style plaid hat, and then the other suspect has the camouflage jacket with the black and white polka dot gloves he's wearing. But they appear in all 3 of the break-ins, and again, there are other suspects helping them carry the items out the store and acting as lookouts. We're hoping if anyone out there has information on the suspects or the property that was stolen, they'd give us a call for us to further investigate.
These thieves robbed a cell phone store of over $4,000 in phones, an Aaron's rental center of 4 large flat-screen TVs, and a Sunoco station for a can of Red Bull. Yes, you heard that right. They broke in and took 1 can of Red Bull. Take a good look at the pictures. They were pretty well covered up, but one had a plaid Russian-style winter cap and the other had black and white polka-dotted gloves. They knocked off 3 stores in one night on the west side. If you recognize these thieves, there's a cash reward waiting for you. Just pick up the phone and call Crime Stoppers at 216-25-CRIME or log on to 25crime.com and leave a web tip. We'll be right back with more when we return to Crime Stoppers Case Files.
Crime Stoppers is an international organization dedicated to bringing resolution to unsolved crimes. Members of the public work with police to make the world a safer place. Since 1975, thousands of Crime Stoppers organizations worldwide have helped make over 1 million arrests. Crime Stoppers acts as your advocate, keeping you anonymous and ensuring that your information gets to the right law enforcement agency. To leave a tip, log on to www.crimestoppersone.com.
On February 3rd, there was an electrical explosion at the Easterly Wastewater Treatment Facility on Lakeshore Boulevard. This is the sort of incident that all Americans need to guard against because it could disrupt the infrastructure of an entire region, and in this case, ours. Terrorism isn't suspected in this crime, but sabotage is.
The wastewater treatment plant is the Easterly Wastewater Treatment Plant located on Lakeshore Boulevard. What they do is they treat the water that comes in that is contaminated and release it back into the lake as clean water. On February 3rd, 2010, there were electrical contractors working on equipment in the blower motor control room. This equipment controls aeration blowers that forces air into aeration tanks as part of their treatment process. They had this equipment turned off for 3 days in order to supply new wiring to 5 separate blower motor controllers. And when the equipment was re-energized on Wednesday, February 3rd, it was discovered that somebody had placed a metal object inside the high voltage equipment, causing it to explode. We have a couple theories about what occurred here. One theory is the box was accidentally left inside the piece of equipment by the workers working on the equipment. We do not believe that that is the case whatsoever. Anybody with electrical knowledge, especially high voltage knowledge, would know to never put that in there. We do have a pretty good theory that the box was introduced into the piece of equipment during lunch between 12 and 12:30 on Wednesday, February 3rd. And nobody was around in the building. It's a building that's unmanned, it's self-sufficient, runs itself, and only requires a visit from district employees if there's a problem. There was ample time there for someone to come into that area when no one was there. When they came back from lunch, they met with district employees to re-energize the switch. Some of the district employees that are going to do the switching are putting on arc flash protection. Just in case something like this happens, it's meant to protect them from being burned, not from being electrocuted, only from being burned by the plasma. The switch where the electrical arc occurred was already closed. The process is that switch is turned on prior to the circuit being energized. So nothing happens other than the switch is engaged. Everybody walks away from that area and goes to the high voltage switching area in the substation room. And when they engaged that high voltage switch, everybody heard a tremendous boom and saw light coming out of that room and a lot of smoke. And once they were able to open the door to investigate what had happened on the interior of the switch, everything was blackened and melted, and it was some time, about an hour, before they realized that there was this metal box was placed in there, until they actually recognized it as being part of outdated equipment that was removed from this motor controller. And that's when they alerted authorities.
Our boss has tasked us to do whatever it takes to find out what happened and to solve this case. And everyone involved is taking steps to make sure this never happens again.
The damage that occurred was localized to the switch itself, which is only a small part of the motor controller. But since the motor controller is so old, the entire unit will have to be replaced. This was a very quick event because the main breaker controlling this piece of equipment did its job and opened up the circuit so that electricity was not supplied constantly. It's very quick, but long enough to utterly destroy that portion of the piece of equipment. The arc that was generated as a result of this incident is approximately 11,000 degrees, approximately the temperature of the surface of the sun, the visible part of the sun. If that breaker had failed and not did its job, they could have been killed because the arc could have traveled all the way back to them and physically blown that equipment apart. They could have been killed. We would have had a lot more damage and possibly loss of life.
The person that committed this act probably had no idea the extent of the investigation that would come out of this.
The act of placing this box within this piece of equipment threatened the City of Cleveland's infrastructure, in that this is part of the water treatment process that provides us with fresh drinking water and a lot of other communities surrounding Cleveland.
If they want to come forward, we'd be happy to listen.
Arson investigators need your help. If you know anything about this crime, please call Crime Stoppers. The person or persons who did this may not have realized the ramifications of trying to disrupt the city's water supply, and we hope they come clean and bring this to a close. How serious is this crime? The reward has been boosted by donations from several organizations and now stands at $5,000. Call in your tip now.
In 1975, the first Crime Stoppers organization was formed by a detective who believed media attention helped solve cases. Since then, thousands of Crime Stoppers organizations have been formed around the globe with the same mission, encouraging members of the public to stand up against crime. Every 14 minutes, Crime Stoppers help solve a crime somewhere in the world. Get involved. Contact your Crime Stoppers organization and learn how you can help. Leave a tip, crimestoppersone.com.
John Kearney was a fun-loving 42-year-old from Middleburg Heights. On Christmas morning 2005, just over 5 years ago, he left his suburban home to give a friend a ride to Cleveland, leaving his girlfriend at home waiting for him. Tragically, he never made it back home that Christmas day. In fact, he never came home again because he was brutally murdered on Lorraine Avenue. Here's the story of the murder of John Kearney.
Well, John Kearney was my live-in companion for 6 years. Prior to that, we were best buds and hung out together a lot. He was a very loving and giving person, and he was just always out there to, see people along. He's known as JK, or also a lot of his close friends called him the Gambler, because he always liked to play poker. We actually met through some friends, Dave and Sue Graley, and John was kind of a shy guy when it came to asking people out, and he actually had to have David ask me out on a date for him. And Dave and Sue still remain very close friends of mine, are very supportive through this whole thing, and they miss John very much as well because he was a very big part of their lives. He really didn't have a family anymore. His mother had passed away probably about 5 years or so before he had passed away. And he was always out there a loner, but he always stayed close with his friends. Christmas Eve of 2005, we had been to our family get-together, and we had returned home about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I remember that we sat and we had gotten some lottery tickets in our Christmas gifts, so we were scratching our tickets, and I laid on the couch and was watching The Christmas Story. And I must have dozed, and I believe he got a phone call from a friend, maybe about 3 or so in the morning, and the person needed a ride. I wasn't awake at that time that he left, but I had woken up later, probably around 4 or so in the morning, and saw he wasn't there, and he had been tinkering with his eyeglasses. And they were sitting there with the tools and the screws and everything, so I called his cell phone, and he had told me he'd give a buddy a ride and he was going to be home shortly. That time I just kind of remember going back to sleep, and then it wasn't long after 5 in the morning that I received a phone call on my cell phone from his cell phone. And the first thing he said is he's not going to make it home. Well, of course, knowing that when some guys with the guys get out together, I thought he was pulling my leg and started, well, where are you, blah, blah, blah. And then his voice was changing and he was breathing very hard and rapidly, and he told me he had gotten shot. When I asked him if he knew who shot him, he did tell me no, and he was going by 85th, which I'm assuming West 85th and Lorraine Avenue. At that point, hearing how he sounded on the phone, I knew that he was either bleeding internally or very seriously hurt, and he was trying to make it home so I could help him. And I got him to get to the intersection of West Boulevard and Lorraine, and I knew the BP station there was open 24 hours, and I knew someone could get him help there. And at that point, his breathing became more erratic and it sounded shaky, so either he was losing blood or whatever was happening. While I had him on the phone, I did call my nephew Christopher. He lived closer to that area because I was trying to get there to help John myself. And I hung up with John as I heard him open the car door because I heard the keys ding, And I assumed in my mind that he was able to make it into the gas station to ask for help. At that point then when we hung up, I got my sister's car and I was traveling from Middleburg down there. My nephew got there. Evidently John did not make it inside of the BP and he collapsed outside the BP station. And I'm not sure how long he was laying there, but another customer who had come up to get gas had found him. And the clerk there, I guess, evidently is the people who did contact 911. When I did arrive on the scene, they were placing John into the ambulance. They would not let me get into the ambulance with him because they were working on him, evidently that he was already starting to pass on the scene due to loss of blood. They did take him to Metro Hospital where my nephew and I followed, and he was in surgery 2 to 3 hours, and then the surgeons did come out and tell me that he was unable to survive the surgery. At that point, we contacted the Cleveland Police Homicide Unit, and they sent the detectives to the hospital, and then began our reign of trying to sort out what had happened.
We'll be right back with more on the murder of John Kearney right after this. We now continue the tragic story of the murder of John Kearney.
December 25th, 2005, which was Christmas morning, about 5 a.m., John Kearney left his Middleburg Heights home, telling his girlfriend that he was going to give a friend a ride home. He didn't specify who or where. And approximately an hour later, he called her stating he was in the area of West 85th and Lorraine Avenue and had been shot. From there, she advised him to go to the nearest gas station, which happened to be a BP gas station at West Boulevard in Lorraine. He drove to that location where he parked his vehicle, exited, and collapsed by the building. He was found by 2 customers laying next to the building in front with a gunshot wound to the left side of his chest. Inspecting his vehicle, it appeared that he was actually shot through a closed driver's window due to the window being shattered.
John was the kind of guy that would put his whole world on hold to go help a friend in need. And especially it being Christmas Eve, I'm sure he thought he was doing the right thing by leaving the home at that time in the morning and going in that area. But all of us know in JK, he's thought he was invincible, but evidently I think he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. My life has felt very empty for the past 4 years without John there. You know, being a live-in companion, fiance, what have you, whatever you want to call it, it's still, you walk in the room, something happens, you expect that person to be there, or you want to call them and share your news or whatever with you. It's been very lonely. I ended up having to start my life completely over. Had to change residence and things like that. There were some illnesses with myself during this time, and it's been very hard. I tried to let this go for a while to get on with my life, but until, you know, we can find out what happened and the person that caused him to leave us too soon should pay their debt. And I'm asking anyone out there that has maybe seen anything that Christmas morning or know anything to please, please contact these people and let's solve this case so I can put John to rest peacefully.
John Kearney was killed by a person or persons who didn't care if it was Christmas. He was killed by someone who had no value whatsoever for human life. And this case has gone cold. And that means that we are the ones that have to help solve it. If you know anything at all that can help law enforcement, a tip or a lead that helps to solve this case, call Crime Stoppers at 216-252-7463. Thank you for joining us for Crime Stoppers Case Files, where you are empowered to help clean up the streets. Remember, our towns and our neighborhoods are a direct reflection of what we allow them to be. So let's all do our part to make them safe. We'll see you next week for another edition of Crime Stoppers Case Files.